going to continue halacha down today. We're going to talk about Bitul B'Shisha. Time-wise, I think we're going to do just half of Bitul B'Shisha, because there's a lot to say. So we'll probably do half today and half next time. Okay, let's read the Shulchan Aruch again, just to understand some missing words from last time. The Shulchan Aruch said, Kol el hamashkim, all the mashkim that we talked about until now, that you're allowed to eat and you're allowed to drink only under certain circumstances, v'chein hachometz shel shecher, and also vinegar made out of barley, out of shecher, out of some kind of a beer. So those things are inherently they're kosher, but also it's nice to mehem and demem yukarmid mehayayin. You can't buy them if they're more expensive than wine. Why? Because then there's a possibility that you'd mix it in wine. Like for example, if you bought the apple wine and that's more expensive than grape wine, so maybe he mixed the grape wine into it and made it to save some money, and therefore the chashash that there's stam yain mixed into it. And then the Shulchan goes on later on to explain some more details about that. And what we're focusing on is what the words of the Ramah, which we didn't say last time, which is ad she'ein tzam b'chavat. The Ramah says that of course when there's a chashash that someone mixing something treif, in this case it's wine, someone mixes wine into it, it's only a chashash if you would mix something in that would not be batul. If the thing that it's going to mix in is going to be batul, then of course there's nothing to worry about. I mean, we wouldn't want to do it lechatchila, but as far as the food being kosher, the food would be kosher. So the only chashash is when the possibility that he'd mix something in, and the thing that he would mix in would be not batul at all. Okay? So the place can pick up on this funny, surprising wording that the Ramah uses. The Ramah says, ad she'ein tzam b'chavat, until there shouldn't be 60 times as much as batul. And what they're picking up on is that the rule is by stam yain, which is what we're going to talk about, that stam yain is batul in shisha in 6 times. It doesn't need 6D times, it needs 6 times only. So why did Ramah say, the chashash is unchoshin shem ir b'hem yain, maybe they mix wine into it, why doesn't he say, ad she'ein vav l'vatul, until there's not 6 times to be vatul? Why would he say, there has to be 60 times to be vatul? Okay, so, before we get to the answer to that question, in Mirza Shem, we're going to say the answer today to that question. But before we get to the answer to that question, I have to first talk about Bitul B'Shisha. Before I tell you Bitul B'Shisha, I have to tell you that this is really not the real place to do a Bitul B'Shisha. Really, it would be in Kuf Lamed Daled, but we're not planning on doing it in Kuf Lamed Daled, so that's what we're going to do it over here. Okay, there's a place to put it in Kuf Lamed Daled. There's another sim in Hilchos Kliyayin, but over there, that's where the official place for the din is. We could also talk about it in Kuf Chav Gimel, but I'd rather do it here. Here it fits in a little bit more. Okay, so we're going to talk about it here. Okay, so the Mishnah says like this. There's a Mishnah that says that if you have yayin nesach mixed into regular wine, so the din is, or if you have water poured into regular water, so the din is, it's asur b'mashu. What happens if you have yayin nesach mixed into water, plain water? Then the Mishnah says it's benois and tam. Okay? So, and then the end of the Mishnah says is, zehaklal, min b'mina is b'mashu, min b'she'en mina is b'nois and tam. Okay? That's what the Mishnah says. So if you read that Mishnah by yourself, and any regular person who read the Mishnah would say is, what does it mean it's b'nois and tam? B'nois and tam all over the place means b'shishim. Like a few blocks beforehand, the Mishnah said about if you have stam yain mixed into food, it's b'nois and tam, and everybody understands it to mean b'shishim. Everything b'nois and tam means until shishim. So the simple understanding is that when the Mishnah says b'nois and tam means is that it's batul b'shishim. Okay? And some Rishonim hold that. Some Rishonim hold, in fact, that stam yain mixed into water is b'shishim. Okay? But there's a raya against that. Other Rishonim bring a raya against that from a Gemara just on the next Amud. Okay? And the Gemara says like this. When you make wine, in times of the Gemara, when they made wine, they would take the wine as it's fermented from the grape juice, and they would, when they make wine, they would take it and they would dilute it in 3 parts to 1. Okay? There are different theories as to why they dilute 3 parts to 1. I mean, we don't dilute our wine 3 parts to 1. But the Gemara says if you don't dilute it 3 parts to 1, it doesn't count. That's not a way to drink wine. There are theories about that. Either they had stronger wines, maybe they had yeast was stronger, and made extra strong wines that maybe they had in those days. Maybe since they didn't have Pepsi and other things to drink, they drank lots of wine, so they diluted it to like a 5%, like a beer type of a drink. They didn't want to be drunk all the time. Not clear. Okay, but for some reason they used to do that. They would take their they would take their wine and they would dilute it 3 times. The Gemara says you have 3 times 1. Okay? So the Gemara says like this. What happens if a person had 2 cups of wine? Okay? And one was wine that was truma wine and one was chulin wine. Okay? But each one of them had been diluted in 3 parts water as it was supposed to. The Gemara didn't say it was diluted. It's assumed that the Gemara was talking that it was diluted. Okay, the Gemara makes the assumption that it diluted 3 parts to 1 in water of wine. And so the Gemara says, what happens if these 2 things got mixed together? What's the din? So the Gemara goes back and forth a little bit, and the Gemara comes out that the din is that it's mutter. Okay, you're allowed to drink the whole thing. And if you're not a kohen, you're allowed to drink the whole thing. Why are you allowed to drink the whole thing? Because we say salek esmina k'mishe'enei. Okay, we ignore the chulin wine portion of this mixture, and therefore the truma wine is bottled in the water. Okay, there's water from both sides, from both cups. So with salekes minay, we ignore the chulin wine. V'she'ein minay rab alav mavatlei, and now you have the water to be mevatled. Okay, well, so of course you're scratching your head because if you read the Gemara, what do you mean there's enough water? There's only 6 times water to be mevatled. So from this is the raya that water is mevatled. Stam yain, that wine is bottled in 6 times. Okay, this is the Gemara that's a right to that thing. So, what does it mean? I'll tell you that in a minute. Okay, so the Mechaber in Kuflam Dalam, I'll turn to the page. It's on my page. The Mechaber says, I didn't put it on the screen, I'm sorry. The Mechaber says, Kamiyah b'mayim b'hen k'dei levato tam hayayin. How much you have to have this in Kuflam Dalam? Shisha chlopim connectoi. V'chol sheish b'mayim k'shir azeh mutar fil b'shtir. Okay? So what's the reason for this? Why is it that wine is bottled in 6 times? Okay? I mean, we have a Gemara, and it's a machlokes Rishonim. We pass like these Rishonim that says, okay, before I get to reason, back up. Okay, we've got the reason. How would you read the Ramah? This is the Ramah in Kuf Chav Gimel that we were going to maybe talk about over this thing. This is the Ramah says in Kuf Chav Gimel. He says this is all the Ramah. Yayin Mozuk calls man sheish by time yayin aser. V'yesh batirin v'shisha chalakamayim k'moshi yispar simin Kuf Lamadal. Okay, what do you think the Ramah is saying? So I'll tell you first what it says in Ramosha. I wasn't so clear that you had to read it like that. Okay, Ramesh says like this. Ramesh says, what the Ramah is bringing is 2 shitas. Yayin mozuk kol sheish b'tam yayin aser. It needs shishim. V'yesh matirin v'shisha chalakamayim. Okay, some people say that you can only have shisha. K'mosh yispar b'simin Kuf Lamadal. What I just told you, the Shulchan Aruch says in Kuf Lamadal. The Ramah doesn't say anything in Kuf Lamadal. It says in Kuf Lamadal that you have to be bottled 6 times. Okay, that's how Ramesh reads it. Okay, I wasn't convinced that that's how you had to read it. Now, Ramosha, in a different place, says that the Ramah paskins that it's enough to have 6. Okay, but he says in other places he says, well, the Ramah brings 2 days about it. Okay, I wasn't convinced because let's read really what the Ramah is saying is the first line. Yayin mazuk kol sheish bo tam yayin aser. That's a Mishnah. Yayin b'mayim b'noisen tam. That's what the first line says. If it kol sheish bo tam yayin aser, that's what the Mishnah says. B'noisen tam. V'yesh matirim, and there are those Rishonim who understand the Mishnah to be talking about that means 6 times. He didn't say that the sheet is shishim. What he said the first line is not a sheet of shishim. The first line, that's the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says b'noisen tam. Okay, that's
V'yesh matirim.
V'yesh matirim. So v'yesh matirim is a lashon that Shulchan Aruch will use when he's saying a sheet of Rishonim that's not really Gemara. It's not really a Beverages Gemara. It says this. So okay, so Ramosha says no. Ramosha says that he's bringing 2 days. I wasn't so to me. I thought the Mishnah. This is really what happens on Amud Aleph. On Amud Aleph it says b'noisen tam, and when you turn the page it says b'shisha. That's really what if you open up a Gemara on Amud Aleph it says b'noisen tam. Turn Talmud Beis, and the way we're understanding it says b'shisha. So that's okay. You can read it either way. Okay, but anyhow, the Shulchan Aruch passes that it's in 6. The Ramah says K'mosh Yisbar Kuf Lamadal. That's in 6. The Shach says we pass like that. Okay, so what's the reason? What's the reason why it should be enough to have 6? So a few Rishonim say the same kind of a thing. A lot of people bring down from Iran, and the Ran says like this. The Ran says what appears to be 2 different reasons. Okay, one he says is, I didn't put on the screen for you, I'm sorry. One is that he says that it is poigmoy, it ruins the taste. And the other is that it's just a kiyua. Kiyua means just like a tanginess, just like a leftover, a residue of a taste left over from the thing. Okay, so what is he trying to say? So there's Pri Megadim about it. Pri Megadim in Shar Tervus, and Rav Moshe explains what he says, and I'm telling you, Rav Moshe, it's not so clear what I'm about to say. This way, Rav Shechta explains it this way. So you're hearing a lot of hands over here. The Pri Megadim explains the Ran, who Rav Moshe says, the way Rav Shechta says, which is like this: when you take juice out of a fruit, you take apple juice or orange juice. So the din is it has no connection to that fruit that it came from. It does not have the din of the fruit that it came from. If you take, from the simplest understanding, you take brachas, you take apple juice and you drink apple juice, you make a shachar. You don't make a ha'etz on apple juice because juice is not considered just the water. It's not considered to be anything, even though of course it has a connection in taste. It's not considered to be that din. One exception to that rule is grape juice. Okay, or wine, same thing. Which is, when you take the juice out of the grape, it is considered to be the same din as the original fruit. It's actually an upgrade on the original fruit. Okay, so it's considered to be connected to the original fruit. And that's fine as long as you use the wine the way it's supposed to be. But when you dilute the wine to the point that it's not wine anymore, you dilute that wine too much, then it's that's not wine anymore, and it goes back to being just like the juice of any other fruit. Okay, it gets degraded to being like apple juice. It still tastes like juice. So does apple juice tastes like apples. But once you dilute it too much, it loses its status. It's no longer the special thing that is connected to the fruit. It's as if an apple juice. So when the Ran says it's poigmoi, he means is the water is poiging the wine. The water takes away from the wine the special status that it had, and it turns the wine into a kiyua be'alma. It turns the wine into something that's just a trace of what used to be the original wine taste. It tastes a little bit like wine or grape juice, but it's just a trace of the original. It's not the original. The original was connected to a grape. And this is cut off and doesn't connect to the grape. Okay?
Why is that?
Why?
There's no fit in the word, so there's no need to say so much. Just say it's ruined. It's so fragile. It's a delicate wine. And if you dilute it too much, then it's not chashuv enough.
And it's not chashuv enough, therefore what?
And therefore it's not wine. It's a kiyua.
So Rashi says it's therefore, what does it mean it's not wine? It means that it's treated like the juice of any other fruit. Okay. Okay, so you could take it your way if you'd like to. Maybe, but that's not what Rashi said. This part that I said so far is what Rashi said. He says, and therefore, what happens now, there's another step. That's one step. The second step is that because it's not wine anymore, because this is not wine, therefore the dinim that would be connected to wine also fall off. Meaning, this wine that we have here, that the yain mazug, this wine got diluted in water. The wine, before you diluted it, was treif. A guy had touched it was stam yain. Now when it gets too diluted, it becomes mutter, means is that it doesn't have the din of wine either. Usually when something's usher, it doesn't help to undo it. To dilute it's not going to help you. So you mavatul b'shishim. Over here you dilute it to the point that it doesn't have the din of wine anymore, and it doesn't have wine. The isser of that wine also has to fall off.
Why does it say the word connection to the fruit?
Because it can only become stam yain if it was wine. The juice of apples can't become.
Wine. This is not wine. Chazal grades are wine. This is not wine. Why does it say the fruit?
Okay, that's how Rashi says it. That's how Rashi explains it.
Fruit? Where do I say it?
That's what Rashi said. He says when you have a regular juice of the regular liquid coming out of a fruit, that's a kiyua. That's like just a trace of the original taste that doesn't count as anything. As opposed to when it comes from grapes, that is considered connected as long as it says choshev like wine could have.
Grape?
So the grape. Yeah.
Chazal grades are grapes, so grades are wine.
No, I said, but it has a chashivas. It has a wine status to it.
So the grades are wine. This is not wine.
Okay, you could say it again. You could say it that way. That's how Rav Moshe says it. Okay, and so now Rav Moshe says this. I'm going to get back to this in a second. Rav Moshe says this, even though he tells you, if you look in some of the Rishonim, there are diukim that the poigmoi and the kiyu are on the water. That the wine into water ruins the water. Okay, he's learning that the wine ruins that the water ruins the wine. He says he brings the yukim from Rishonim saying that the wine ruins the water. Ramesh says, I don't understand what that could mean. He says, what's wrong with that? Lots of people want to dilute grape juice into water and drink it like that. So he changes Gersaris in order to make it fit with this plan.
You're putting water.
And this is like be bad for the water. Okay, it would be ruining.
So one flavored water, you put a lot more. So if you put too little, it tastes off.
just has an off taste. Okay, okay, so there's just before we go on, there's a weakness to what Moshe is saying. Okay, you remember the case of the Gemara. The case of the Gemara that we learned this whole din from of Stam Yain being Bitul B'Shisha was not talking about wine. Okay, it wasn't talking about Stam Yain. Okay, the Gemara's case was Truma into Chulin. Okay, well, Truma into Chulin, what does the din care whether the thing is wine or not? When we're talking about Stam Yain, the Isser connects to the fact that it's wine. If we take away the status of it being wine, then somehow we could say we'll take away the din that are connected to wine also. But in Truma, the din has nothing to do with it being wine. It's just you happen to be mafresh truma from grape juice. You could have been mafresh truma from something else also. There's nothing special about it being wine. The whole din of Bitul B'Shisha came from a case where wine was not important. It wasn't significant that it was wine. It just so happened to be that it was wine. It could have been something else also. You could have been mafresh truma from potatoes also.
Wine is much more common.
It's more hummer, but it's not because it's wine.
It is because it's a chashva drink. That's why it's a deraisa.
So if you water it down, you're not having Trumas U'Maises anymore?
Like any other person.
You see with the rice, you're not having Trumas U'Maises anymore? Okay. Sounds hard to imagine. I'm saying, if our Gemara, that we're talking about it for wine din, and so we hear the connection, say if it's not wine, somehow you could take away the Isser. That's magic. Usually we don't take off Isurim retroactively. Okay, fine. Okay, so our next thing we have to talk about is, which liquids the dinim applies to. Okay, we're going to get back into HRMO. Okay, so the Mishnah I mentioned to you was talking about wine mixed into water. Okay, Mayim, Yayim, B'Mayim, the Mishnah is B'nois and Tam, which we found out that B'nois and Tam doesn't mean B'nois and Tam. B'nois and Tam means in 6 times. I've got to tell you, the Ran says, the pshat in the Mishnah is B'nois and Tam means B'nois and Tam L'shvach. Okay, it didn't work, which is not contextual. Doesn't fit in with the other Mishnah. Doesn't fit at the end of the Mishnah. The end of the Mishnah says, Min b'mina b'mashu, min b'she'eni mina b'nois and Tam, but it says B'nois and Tam L'shvach. That's what it means. Okay, so that's what the Mishnah says. I know, but when it says b'nois and tam means it as long as it gives taste over, it makes it taste good. Okay. So that's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah of the Gemara say it's talking about wine mixed into water. This Vector says this is only when wine is mixed into water. But if wine is mixed into food, then it needs a regular Bitul B'Shisha. Okay? This Vector is sort of coming from a Mishnah earlier. And when it's wine mixed into food, it needs shishim. Okay, so what's the pshat? What's the logic why that there should be difference if the wine mixed into water or into food? The difference is that if the whole reason why yayin is bottled 6 times to 1 in water is because it's no longer wine, well, that's fine as long as you dilute it. As long as you mix other water into it, it becomes not wine anymore, and you could say this is not wine and it loses the Isra. And when I put wine into potato kugel, okay, if I put wine into something else, I'm not diluting the wine. I'm not destroying the wine. I'm just mixing it with something else. So in that case, it needs regular shishim, like regular good old rules, like it's a mix it together. It's a flavor. It's wine in something. It's wine in something rather than no longer wine. Okay, so that's why you need shishim. Okay, so the Taz says, the Taz by us says that that's only true. This that we say that it needs shishim is when it mixes into food. But if it mixes into a liquid, then it needs regular shisha. Okay? He says the Mishnah happens to be talking about water. Okay? The Mishnah happens to be talking about water, but he says, think about it. He says, if water could dilute the taste of wine, then kosher cane, apple juice, and orange juice could dilute the taste. Any liquid. The only difference what beverage you want to mix it into. He says, anything could be. Other things have even more taste. So if water could make wine lose its chashivas, then kosher cane, other things could do that too also. So he says, if there's anything, and therefore, so he says, I don't understand why the Ramah said, our kasha that we started with, how come the Ramah says, he says, who needs shishim? Why don't you have shisha? Should be good enough. The wine here is mixed into all kinds of funny stuff, into vinegars and beers and stuff like that. It's not water. Okay, it's not water. Who cares? Even shisha should be good enough. He says, well, why does the Ramah say shishim? So he answers that the reason why the Ramah says shishim is because this quote that says these chumras are only ain't enough, it isn't enough to be evacuated, is coming from Rishonim. If it was a Mordechai, if I remember, it's coming from Rishonim who happen to hold, like those who hold that Stam Yain is Bitul B'Shishim. Okay, that there's no din of bitul b'shisha. It's coming from those Rishonim, people who happen to hold in our original machlokes that stam yain needs bitul b'shishim happen to be the ones who say ad she'ein enough to be mevatel. So when he quoted them, he used their words, and their words are ad she'ein tzamach levatel. But since we pass in Kuf Lam Dalet that you only need six times to be mevatel, so really that would have been the right thing to say. It would have been Vav would have been the right thing to say. He happens to make shishim because he was quoting someone who said it. Who says it?
Yeah.
Taz says it. Taz says it. Okay, that's what Taz says. Okay. That's what Taz says. So the Taz makes lots of sense with the way Ramesh explained it. Okay? Ramesh explained that what's happening is the water is diluting the wine. The water is making the wine not to be such wine anymore. So if, like I just said to you, if the water could do that, kosher and something else could do that. Okay? It also helps us understand another Taz, which is...
Why wasn't kosher?
Because if water could take away from wine's chashivas, then something with a stronger taste to it... What? Because it ruins it. So something with a stronger taste would even more ruin the wine. And take...
That's what I want into a flavor drink.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it enhances it. This mixture.
No. We're not talking whether it enhances the mixture. We're talking whether it enhances the wine. So if the wine is being ruined...
It's functioning as a flavoring, so the wine is enhancing.
No. Don't look at the other food. Look at the wine itself.
Look at the mixture.
No, look at the wine itself. So, no, the way Ramesh said it, we don't care about the liquid, we care about the wine. So if I have a fancy cup of wine, and I pour water into it, I watered it down. If I put apple juice into it, I even more ruined it. I ruined it. I didn't just dilute it, I added another taste. What?
It's different things. You make something else. Like if you add water to something, water inherently is tasteless. So when you add the water to it, it's like, it makes the thing itself different. When you add apple juice to wine, you're having wine apple juice.
So you're flavoring the wine. You see, maybe that's an improvement to it.
You're not changing
Okay.
it.
The Taz says it is. The Taz is kosher. The Taz's kosher came, it makes sense to me the way Ramesh explained. And then there's another Taz also, which is, where that is that? In Kufam Tower. Oh, Taz in Kufam Tower. He says like this. He says, the Gemara that we said says that wine is batel b'shisha. Okay, that's what the Gemara said. But the Gemara gave one case. It said if you mix a cup of wine with a cup of wine of chuma with a cup of wine of chulin, then this is the din. He says, but it's not necessarily that you need 6 times. He says, really, there's a point. You're supposed to put in 3 times water for every part of wine. 3 measures of water for every measure of wine. He says, so what happens if you put in 4 times? What happens if you put in 5 times? There's going to come a point that you're going to dilute it so bad that it's not going to be like real wine anymore. It's going to lose that chashivas. When the Gemara said 6, it's because in every single wine, if you put in 6 times, you'll have done it. You took twice as much water as you were supposed to. In every single wine, that will ruin the wine. He says, but some wines might be 4 or 5 times. He says, it's lav dafka said always 6 times, so we never know. We don't know exactly what the kaddish is, so we'll go with the Gemara. He says, but really it could be 4 or 5 times. It could be less than that. Doesn't have to dafka be 6 times. He says, that's for sure 6, but 5 might be also. Okay, so that also fits with what, again, the same point, the way Ramesh explained it, we understand that it could be it's 6 times is for sure no good, and 4 or 5 times might also be. Okay, now I didn't see others say like that Taz, that you could, there are possibilities to be with, that 4 or 5 might be enough, but that's what the Taz says. In contrast, the Kudus Kesef over here says, he disagrees. He says, look at the Isra Hektar. He says, the Isra Hektar says, the only time it's bitul b'shisha is with water, not with other things. Now, the Isra Hektar actually says, not with foods. He says, but he says not with other things. He says, so if he says it's not with other things, so then that means it's only in water is about the b'shisha. Not when it gets mixed into other things. Mixed with apple juice is not about the b'shisha. He says, right, look at the Ramah. The Ramah says, I changed time that way. Why does the Ramah say you need 60? He says, because the Ramah says 60, because it's only into water that's about the b'shisha. But not when it's into other things. Into other things, it needs more. It needs 60, the regular shisha. Okay, now, if we only knew it was on this page, then we could have said, we could have explained that the Kudus Kesef calls like the other pshat, the one where Moshe rejects, that the wine ruins the water. Okay, that the wine ruins the water. If the wine ruins the water, then wine, the Gemara is teaching us something that we would have never dreamt of, that wine into water is bad for the water. That's just a piece of information. We will accept it, but the Gemara is saying that wine into water. We have no idea whether that would be true when you put wine into apple juice. We have no idea. We would have no way of knowing that. So it's a piece of news. When we say the way the Ramesh is saying and the way the Taz is saying that the water ruins the wine, then we could imagine that if something has a stronger taste, it could more easily ruin the wine. But if it's the wine ruining something else, so how should I know? Wine ruins water. Okay, maybe it doesn't ruin apple juice. We could have imagined that was pshat l'shach. We could have, except that there's a Magen Avram in Hilchos Brachos. The Magen Avram says essentially the same thing as what we're calling the Nekudas Kesef. He says, basically he says the same din that other liquids is not Batal B'Shisha, but the Magen Avraham is very clear that it's the wine ruining the water. Okay, so maybe it could be shot in the Nekudas Kesef, but it's not going to be shot in everyone holds like that. That's not what the Magen Avraham says now. Okay, so it's true that everyone who looks at this page says that that's what the Nekudas Kesef says, that you need to have you need shishim if it's bottled into other waters. Where Moshe says, he says, but you should know that Aruch Chaim, it brings in a different Magen Avraham, brings a shach. Okay, it's a shach that I know we don't have. It's a shach, a gillion on the Aruch Chaim, who says something from which we could be medayek that the shach holds that that wine is bottled b'shisha into other liquids also. Okay, not like the Nekudas Kesef. Okay, so Moshe is miyashiv that to say that it depends what it's mixing into. He says if it mixes into something with a bland taste, then it needs shishim. If it mixes something with a strong taste, then shisha is good enough. What Ramesh is talking about, if you get mixed into whiskey has a strong taste. Ramesh says the shach would agree that it's batal b'shisha. Okay, it's only when it mixes into a weak taste that it needs shishim. And the Magen Avraham, I told you a second ago, the Magen Avraham essentially says the same thing. He says it in a variation of it. He says it depends if the wine is weak or strong. Okay, Ramesh is saying it depends if the liquid going into it is weak or strong. The Magen Avraham says it depends if the wine is weak or strong. So even though the Magen Avraham says you need shishim, he says b'yenish shalanu, it's enough to have shisha. So based on all this, based on the fact that the Taz says that it's 6 into all liquids, based on the fact that the Shach and the Magen Avraham basically say in most cases it's going to be a shisha also, Ramesh Pascal said that wine is batal b'shisha even into other liquids, not just into water. And that's also Pri Chodesh and the Chacham say the same thing. And that's what most American hashgachas would follow, such a ruling, that wine is batal b'shisha into every liquid, not just into water. However, before we walk away, Ramesh says, and we'll talk more about this tshuva in the future, in this famous tshuva Ramesh about this situation, he says there are 6 reasons to be machmir. He says even though the din is that it's mutter, he says the Baal Nefesh should be machmir. And of his reasons, reason number 2 and number 3 are, reason number 2 is a Baal Nefesh should be machmir for the Shittas of Rishonim that Stam Yain is always needs shishim, even though the Shulchan Aruch said it needs shisha, but it's a Machlokes Rishonim, so a Baal Nefesh should be machmir to say that it needs shishim always. And reason number 3 he has is that you should be choishish for the simple understanding of the Nekudas Kesef that Stam Yain is only batal b'shisha into water, not into other liquids. So he says, so Baal Nefesh has reason to be machmir. So even though in the din, he says the din is that Stam Yain is batal b'shisha into water and into all other liquids, he says the Baal Nefesh has reason to be machmir. Now, how did I thought we were going to finish? Okay, so far, today, we spoke about just the basics and the rules, or many of the rules. But in Mitzvah Shem for next time, I have a number of applications for this din and another set of rules that comes along with also. That we can next time.